Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of American Horror Story New York City, episodes 5 and 6.
Yep.
Okay, just big picture. I'll just say I went on a real journey in these two episodes. I was so angry at one point during episode 5 where I was just like, what are we doing? Why are we here? Why do I care about suddenly psychic Fran? Like, why does any of this matter? And it was my least favorite episode this season. It's not even close. And
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, episode 5 felt like a bit of a filler episode with the whole death cards. Everybody's getting death cards. It's like, okay, we know that this is coming. This has been going on all season. Everybody has been facing death.
if we follow this up with episode 6, and I loved episode 6. Episode 6 is probably one of my favorite episodes this season. And it's just like, why are you guys doing this to me?
But also, if they were going to do what they did in episode 5, they had a huge missed opportunity that we will talk about to tie in the rest of the franchise of something that we saw in Asylum. So, but
Yeah.
before we get into all of that, hit that subscribe button. We're here every week talking about American Horror Story. We have Yellowstone coming up. There's all kinds of good stuff going on here at the channel. So hit that subscribe button. Also follow us over on Instagram, Matt and Jess TV.
Let's just talk about this missed opportunity here.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that right away. So we had this whole story where Fran was like, I need a job. I'm gonna work over here at this psychic shop and I'm gonna learn how to do tarot readings, and everybody's coming in. It's like the whole cast of characters are all coming in to get their reading, and there's all these death cards. Now, she even said in this that the death card doesn't mean what it necessarily means. Like, they've used it in all kinds of shows to be like, ooh, it means someone's gonna die. And that's not actually really what it can mean. It can just mean big changes coming. However, that's not how it was being used here. It was being used as a warning that everybody's going to die. And then they bring in the Angel of Death. And we have seen her before with Frances Conroy in Asylum, giving people the kiss of death. We didn't actually have Frances in this. It was, we saw the wings, we saw the silhouette, we sort of saw the going in for the kiss sort of thing. Why wasn't Frances there? Like, I went and took a look at her IMDb. There's nothing that's kind of going on right now that she couldn't have made that cameo. I feel like, why? Why didn't you just bring her in?
Tinfoil hat time. Here's Ryan Murphy on the heels of The Watcher and a certain other Netflix show, just taking his huge bags of money, just like trotting these over, putting them into the bank account, and then being like, do I really want to pull something out here for another cameo from a past? I understand Ryan Murphy's probably not directly paying for Frances Conroy to be on American Horror Story New York City, but it's all a metaphor. Why you guys being so cheap? I'm just going to assume they didn't want to spend the money to get a iconic former cast member on board.
I would have fallen right out of my chair if they had actually shown her. I was waiting for that moment because she was sort of in the shadows, coming a little closer, a little closer, a little closer, and then nothing. I was just like, oh, come on. Like, you could just drive the money up to her house.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Would have been great, especially for this season. And I do really like this season, and I actually do appreciate that they're not really going overboard with like references to past seasons. It's like, I didn't really like Apocalypse, the crossover season, all that much. It was just like way too complicated. But
No,
this would have been good.
if you're gonna do the Angel of Death, you have to bring her back.
Yeah, it's just like that part of this story in episode 5 was a miss. In general, I didn't need to spend all this time with Fran and everything else. That it just felt like, okay, we've got a certain number of episodes we need to fill here. We don't have enough story for everybody else. So let's just do a Fran episode, and let's bring in Hannah, and let's bring in all these other characters to see what their future holds.
Yeah, there's a couple of storylines that I feel like the show could have done without. And this whole episode with the tarot readings and the same sort of readings over and over again. We already had that all set up on this show, that everybody's in danger. Whiteley's out there, everything with Fire Island, the disease going around, virus going around. We know that there is a lot of stuff going on. We didn't need to have this whole episode of a reminder of, you're all gonna die. Okay, all right, we
Yeah.
know that. And then we have this storyline with Hannah and Adam having a baby, and it feels like it's in there to continue on this sort of story about blood and the red blood cell count and that it's low and sort of that's all going around, but they've already established that as well.
Yeah. Nothing felt necessary in this episode. And it's a bummer because in episode 6, like almost
Oh,
everything felt necessary. Like we have been talking about Fire Island for a long time, and this episode really kind of got my wheels turning a little bit, that like maybe the origination of this disease, this virus that eventually, they've talked about it with deer and everything else.
mhm.
Maybe it's all because of all of these remains that have been scattered across the beach, and everything is tied to this one event.
I was so surprised with how many reveals we got in this episode. Like,
Yeah.
this episode felt like it should have been like episode 9 or even close to the finale, where they're revealing everything, where it's like we have Pat and we have Sam and their relationship and what they did to that guy, and their relationship then to Henry and Whiteley and the fixer and everything.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, this is such a huge reveal. But the good thing about it is that there's still the mystery around Big Daddy, and this reveal made me feel like the person who is Big Daddy is the representation of this victim, the person that Pat accidentally ended up killing. And that's why he's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger in his mind, to the point that he has this confrontation. And I say it like this because I still feel like Big Daddy is this, just big sort of fear in his mind and guilt that's grown into this huge thing, because the person that he killed was a much smaller man. But Big Daddy is Big Daddy. He's huge,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's grown into this huge thing in Patrick's head that he just can't reconcile, that he did this thing, he got away with this thing on top of being a cop, and he's, supposed to serve and protect, and he's done this thing, and he's buried this thing with someone like Sam. Like,
Yeah.
I really think that the fight in the apartment with Big Daddy and Pat was Pat trashing the apartment himself, and him in his mind fighting everything that he just can't repress anymore with this death.
I think it all really makes a good measure of sense, especially when, if you have a hugely traumatic event, like clearly what happened here with Patrick and Sam is something that's like haunting him in a lot of ways. Like it can also cause like these big emotional swings. It can cause like even, these momentary lapses where you don't even feel like yourself anymore. And like that, it all makes sense for Patrick. It also makes sense that, we have seen Big Daddy the most with Sam, with Pat. I know,
Mhm.
we've seen him with other characters here and there, but really, I think we're supposed to view this idea as a construct, and we're supposed to sort of view this as, okay, this is a representation of fear or of shame, of
Mhm.
all these other things that sort of exist within this world. And yeah, it can, for us as viewers, it can exist on the outside of these two characters, but it is sort of like, where did it start? And I think your theory is right. It starts with this. Like I remember seeing this victim and being like, oh, he's way too small. But then yeah, you're right. He's wearing the outfit, he's wearing
Mhm.
everything else that feels like a match.
Yeah, and that's where we get into the Barbara conversation. Like, how did she end up actually dead. That whole sequence that was kind of going on with, you know, Pat and Barbara and everyone in the bathrooms, and then all of a sudden Big Daddy's in the shower with her, and Pat's the one that ends up finding her. I was just like, okay, so how did this actually happen? Because
Yeah.
I don't think that Big Daddy's alive. I think that, as I said, sort of this big fear that's going on. So, what actually happened to her? Did she end up just going through this divorce and she couldn't really handle it? And it became a situation where she just, unalived herself? Or was it a situation where we don't kind of know what's going on with Pat? Is he like having mental breaks where he's almost outside of himself and doing things outside of himself now after what happened way back in the day with Sam? Is he responsible? He's the one that found her. The cops are still outside. No one else came in. There really is only two options here.
Yeah, I had like at first I did have this thought of, oh, did Pat kill her? Like, did that really happen? And it's still a possibility. I'm not going to rule any of that out. I just also wonder because so much of, his guilt and his shame and everything else towards what happened on Fire Island, I think a
Mhm.
lot of it is sort of like, what could I have done differently? Did I do enough? And I also just
Mhm.
sort of wonder here, like, is everything we're sort of seeing with these visions of Big Daddy, what's happening to Barbara, is something going on with her that he could have done more to stop, that he could have done more to help, and he didn't. And because of that, he's sort of seeing this battle go on where maybe she did unalive herself. Maybe it is a
Mhm.
consequence of some other medical issue, but it's something that he on some level is still feeling responsibility for. It's like it's possible that he killed her. It's just like I hope that's not the case just because for me we already have Whiteley and oh my gosh, everything that's I don't need more killers on this show.
Okay, let's talk about
Ugh.
Whiteley. Okay, so there was the big reveal that after everything that happened on Fire Island, we had Sam call in Henry, who then called in their butcher, who was Whiteley.
Yeah.
And when Whiteley showed up, he was kind of like, wait a second, this person isn't innocent. They haven't done anything. You're calling me in for the mob to do these types of jobs. They're normally people who have done bad things. This person has done nothing. They've done nothing wrong. Why am I here for this? And Henry's kind of like, clean it up. Like,
Mhm.
stop asking questions. You've been called in, do this job. And it's seemingly where things started to change for Whiteley, where he was kind of like, okay, I've gone from cleaning up bad guys that, kind of deserved what they got to cleaning up messes of people who didn't do anything wrong, of these crimes that are being committed against innocent people, and I'm not having it. And it seemingly is where this is all stemming from, where he's kind of like, this needs to be brought into the open now.
He there's a lot of Dr. Frankenstein vibes going on right now with
Yep.
Whiteley, where, he is taking just parts of people, as horrible as that is to sort of say, and
Hmm.
he's creating this figure. And I mean, in his
Like
mind,
a Silence of the Lambs.
yeah, he's really creating this idea, this creation that he's going to present as sort of a here's all the error of your ways. This is
Hmm.
all that's just sort of this is what makes this guy to me so dangerous is just that like he is so steadfast in what he clearly believes that nobody, whether it be Henry, whether it be some sort of psychic vision, if Fran ever get nothing is going to get this dude to change his mind.
Yeah, and here's where my little bit of a beef with this episode comes in. I think it was just too much of a coincidence that Whiteley is the guy who comes in to be the butcher. Like, what's the purpose of Henry then? I thought Henry was the cleanup guy. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to call the cleanup guy to call the cleanup guy. It's just like, okay, well, then what is really your purpose? Like, it feels just like too much of a coincidence, because then we end up in this situation where the body has come up of the person that Pat and Sam are responsible for killing. And he's like, oh, look, the cuts on these bones are perfect, exactly like what's happening with the Mai Tai killer. Who is your guy? And it's just like, okay, you didn't need to spell it out quite so cleanly.
Yeah, like my beef with it was just that we had this confrontation away at the end of the episode with Henry, with Whiteley. Whiteley ends up just sort of getting away and all, and it's just sort of like,
Yeah.
okay, at that point, you guys know he's very bad news. I understand Henry, you may be a force of nature in your own way, but you are an older gentleman. Do you really need to be having a one-on-one meeting for anything with this guy? If you're with this guy, you need like a big daddy sized bodyguard or like something with you.
I'm also going to call this out. If he's working for the mob, Henry's working for the mob, and so is Whiteley, and Whiteley is their butcher, then who is Henry to do this without really having enough sort of permission to get this done? We saw Henry meeting with the mob that were like, yeah, get rid of Gino, but nothing about it's okay for you to go and get rid of, Whiteley. Like, this is, someone who's out an employee or working for the mob. Like, how is Henry making these decisions to get rid of this person without talking to anybody?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe Henry's going rogue. I don't know. I also just wanted more Gino. I love Gino. I don't feel like Gino had enough to do in these episodes.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's starting to feel like they don't really know what to do with Theo and Adam now that they've gotten them together. We only really saw Theo in that one episode where everybody's going to Fran to get a reading. And he's like, oh, and now, my boyfriend wants to come here too.
Well, here's the hope here. I mean, you mentioned earlier this could have been episode 9. I agree with that. It
Yeah.
could have been. Maybe they have some other interesting plans that are gonna sort of rope Theo and Adam back into all of this. Hopefully, it's just not another psychic reading episode that doesn't go anywhere.
No, there's enough, meat on this bone that they do not have to have these throwaway episodes of, yeah, a whole episode of psychic readings. We get it. We don't need it. There's so much going on, and there are so many characters that need more screen time and that have really interesting stories. And yeah, not nearly enough Gino. What is he going to do now? I mean, he is in such a weird spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully we get answers very soon. 2 more episodes next week. We will be
Yep.
back discussing all of that. So hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss it. We'll see you here next time.